It's really great to be here. And, wow, what a great start. Um, I'm excited to be here, and I love the topic of monitoring. We started doing monitoring back at the Nisqually River Delta um, back in late 2009. And so, what I'm going to present today is pretty much a website on tidal marsh monitoring. It's sorely outdated, but it came out of those efforts, and I just hope that it can be of some use to you all. I'm also going to stop my video just to preserve some bandwidth, and I'll pop back on after the talk. Okay. All right, let's see if this works. Great. Um, oh, sorry. So we've had some really good discussions and presentations on tidal marsh monitoring and monitoring in general. And so I just wanted to provide just a introduction slide on monitoring and the importance of it. Um, it's often been described as a financial equivalent of accounting, and it is critical in evaluating your management actions and restoration performance and effectiveness. Um, and I just wish it were funded to that extent. Um, so it also can help land managers make decisions on what actions to take in terms of invasive species or if a threshold had been reached. Um, Kevin and Jason did such a great job talking about the monitoring assessments and functions and indicators, and also like their tiered monitoring approach in terms of compliance and effectiveness monitoring. Um, they also presented these really great matrices, which I'm a big fan of, but I didn't include any today. But I'm just going to go over, so how are some of these approaches can be done. Um, and so what we decided to do is have a tiered monitoring approach as well, in which we tiered one would be required or priority monitoring to ensure that the project was working as it was intended to work. And basically, similar to the previous presenters, you really wanted to have the priority monitoring go through some of the things that you can achieve over time, such as your structural changes, like in elevation and vegetation. Those are probably the most common ones. Also, to compare before and after restoration or management action. And tier two is more in terms of effectiveness monitoring or special studies. These are typically more complex, and they evaluate the effectiveness of management actions on specific functions um, or specific species, like habitat use, habitat availability, and associations, and really understanding the drivers of species presence or abundance, um, and to quantify the benefits of a restoration to target species. Um, Part of that is identifying the thresholds for management actions, like and how you can design your monitoring for the ability to detect, let's say, a 25% decline in the population. Um, and so one of the key parts of this that I'll also reiterate is the need for standard protocols across sites, so that you can have these regional comparisons. There are many examples of protocols. And so I'm just going to put some time into this one, um, tidalmarshmonitoring.net. This was the brainchild of John Takakawa, Kelly Turner, myself, in partnership with the Nisqually Indian tribe, Chris Ellings, and the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, Brian Root, and Jean Takakawa. And it was funded by the National Wildlife Refuge System for inventory and monitoring, partially because we were doing monitoring at Nisqually at the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge to evaluate restoration benefits. And they really wanted some sort of documentation of what we were doing. And so we thought, well, geez, maybe this can be helpful for other people too. And it really was designed to be for the practitioner in mind, for on the ground guides. And I apologize, this is painfully out of date. But I'm just going to step through some of the things that we have on here. So this is kind of a site map of some of the things and the protocols that we've developed over time. This, in terms of, why should we monitor, how should we set up monitoring design, and really focusing more on the monitoring methods grouped by physical, biological, and ecological themes. And this focusing a little bit more on restoration monitoring, we provide some kind of discussion on identifying your objectives. And it's really important to make sure that they are clear. We like to set up our monitoring objectives to try to answer and address some hypotheses or questions. And then coming to like some decision rules, like what are your thresholds in terms of, identifying or triggering some sort of action. And then there's a monitoring plan, and then the collecting and the analyzing of the data. And hopefully that informs a management decision. And, in terms of designing the monitoring plan, we provide a little bit more information on adaptive management, using a before-after control impact design to really try to get greater strength of inference in informing these type of studies. Some discussion on spatial and temporal scales, how to set up monitoring stations, things like that. One example here is that I pulled that is really common is trying to set up elevation monitoring. And that could be done a variety of ways and methods. So on the left, we presented 4 different methods of assessing elevations. One way of doing it is walking through the marsh and using an RTK GPS to collect, these RTK points at point intervals, so you could generate a digital elevation model. And we included some steps of how to do that on the right panel. And one of the things you can do is at each point you take, you collect some vegetation information. So you can actually relate your vegetation and diversity or species richness by elevation. And in many tidal sites, you have places that are underwater that may or may not be able to be penetrated by LiDAR. Or it might be too turbid. And so we detail some information on how to map bathymetry. Terrestrial LiDAR is a really fantastic tool. It's becoming more and more available. And it's just amazing some of the resources that are out there. For some project sites where, they require a little bit more spatial resolution, having to fly your own LiDAR can be a possibility. It is expensive, however, but it does provide a really great coverage of your project area in the detail that you may be able to relate that to your vegetation quadrants. So one of the things that, I was telling Todd, like our site is really outdated, and I really would like to have a little bit more information on there that over the years we've learned, some of the problems, some of the common issues that we've been facing. especially in terms of scaling back when resources are limited. And sometimes you're able to scale back, that is a planned effort, like having intense monitoring in the first X number of years, um, and then scale back after that. Or it can be after a particular threshold is reached. Um, and in the worst case, it's usually unplanned or unexpected, when budgets have shortfalls. And so it'd be good to kind of think about these events ahead of time, um, and so that you don't get stuck in the time when you have something unplanned emergency, um, and then you already know what you would do. Um, and one of the consideration is when you're scaling back, how does this impact the data and the ability to achieve your monitoring goals and objectives? Um, Other things are considerations when your SOP needs to change. If you're including updated technology or if you have limited resources, um, how would that impact, the overall um, desired standardized monitoring protocols, but also sometimes and also being adaptive to what you need it to do. Where do I go to troubleshoot issues and get a second opinion? I'm having problems with this data logger, all those things. I think this is such a great forum to have. It's such a great group. I wish it were broadened across regions because there's some very common issues with technology, and there's a lot of people out there with different expertise. Um, the other thing I was thinking in terms of this particular site, it may have some pretty useful on the ground information, but to have a parent website that has like a one-stop shop for all sorts of things um, would be really fantastic, and especially trying to avoid websites that come up. There's a lot of effort that gets placed into it in the beginning, but like ours, it just kind of falls off to the side because we don't have any funding to maintain it. And so it would be a great resource to have a parent website, for a one-stop shop. And I know that other people have mentioned other websites. So whether this can link there or be folded in, that would be a great consideration. I also wanted to put up there some other monitoring resources that might be applicable and helpful. This is not by any means an exhaustive resource. There are many out there, and I try to focus on things that were not talked about in this talk. One of them is the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program here in San Francisco Bay Estuary. They, I am a fan of matrices, matrix ways of presenting information, and I love how you know designing something in terms of like your monitoring question, like what are we interested in looking at, and then designing the monitoring plan around that. And so I felt like this site has a really good way of presenting the questions. Um, Also, what kind of spatial scale is this method applicable for, and what kind of metrics come out of that. And then there's a recommended method. Um, and so I think if you dive deeper into this website, you'll find different SOPs for um, hydrogeomorphic monitoring, vegetation, guidelines for fish and fish habitat, and also kind of advocating having some sort of monitoring site network so that you have your restoration, but you're also comparing that to what your marshes are doing in the landscape. that are not impacted by restoration or management actions for comparison. Another thing that comes up pretty often are, I don't have the ability to do my own LiDAR flight or my own aerial flight. So I just wanted to list some geospatial resources out there. The top, I mean, these are free resources, and just to kind of give you a little more more overview of them. There's a USGS Earth Explorer. Um, it really is more like a data repository where it includes Landsat, Sentinel, MODIS, and other satellite imagery. And it's more in terms of you navigate to the area, you look for the data products you're interested, and then you click results to be able to download it. Whereas Esri Landsat Explorer, it has a more interactive platform, and it really focuses more on Landsat 1 and 2 data. But you're able to, navigate to your area of interest and explore different things like NDVI, which is really kind of fantastic. OpenET is also free, and it also includes other satellite imagery such as Landsat and Sentinel 1 and 2. But the focus really is on evapotranspiration. But what I like about this site is that it uses an ensemble value for multiple satellites imagery, which is pretty nice, because a lot of times you'll go to your aerial image and it'll have a lot of cloud cover from the satellite, and it's hard to control and get a great image. I just wanted to include some other SOPs on hydrology. And so these resources can be there for you. I believe this slide will be available, so you don't have to jot anything down. Of course, there's always some considerations when assessing hydrology, and a lot of things that we come across are common questions like which logger to use and how best to optimize the cost, the longevity of the logger, and the ease of use. Where should I deploy and for how long? And how do I really manage that volume of data and analyze it and get it in a shape that's really usable for my needs or for the needs of others? So I don't have the answers to that question. Oh,
we've got about a minute left, so we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Similarly, elevation and vegetation. Here are some links that I felt were useful, and some common questions that we encounter that would be really great for addressing in the future. Some other thoughts were really, I'm really thankful for this forum because it really helps bridge silos and establish the capacity to partner for shared capacity. We have plenty of people with geospatial data and analytical expertise. It's really about linking them with people who need the on the ground help. How do we learn from all this? And I think, PMAP, the Salish Sea Restoration Wiki, and many other places have this learning built in. And I think we really could benefit from that. And I think it's always a challenge balancing being adaptive and keeping consistency. And I think an analytical approach with data analysis or power analysis can help with that. So in the end, monitoring is complicated, and hopefully we can grow our capacity and learn from each other. And with that, that's all I have. Thank you.